Preterists believe that the book of Revelation was written early, about 50 or 60 AD.
Strike one. That is incorrect, good sir.
So while Paul the Apostle was still alive.
I agree. Paul was still alive.
And it's like, no, dude, can you guys read?
They actually believed it was more like 65 to 70 AD. But let's try not to split any hairs.
When was the book of Revelation written?
Revelation isn't written when Google says it is.
We can debate 2 hours on that. I believe in the early dating of Revelation under Nero.
Today I'm going to explore when Revelation was written. And my first question might reflect exactly what you are thinking, if you're still here. Does it really matter when? I mean, who really cares when it was written, as long as it's true and prophetic and accurately predicts the future? You'd be surprised because there are millions of people who would prefer that it does not predict the future. Instead, that it has already come to pass. They are called preterists.
Preterists believe that the book of Revelation was written early, about 50 or 60 AD.
And preterism is basically the belief that the book of Revelation, basically surrounding the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD.
Do you know what happened in 70 AD? Jerusalem fell, all the Jews were kicked out. And they try to make all of the book of Revelation past history.
The majority opinion of scholars is that preterism is the way the book of Revelation has to be interpreted.
I don't quite believe that statement if you take into account many Catholics and Orthodox. But if you take most Christians, as far as Protestant Christians, do not subscribe to that theory.
And that sounds a little bit intimidating until you realize that the vast majority of scholars are skeptics who do not believe in predictive prophecy.
These are not scholars in any church I've ever been to. I go to Protestant churches, and none of these scholars believe that there's no predictive prophecy in the Bible. So this gentleman is referring to, obviously, those scholars and theologians that are outside the realm of Western Protestantism, okay? Which is my little bubble. So we're talking about on the fringe of Christianity, questionably Christians.
Now, there are evangelicals who are preterists and some very strong people deeply committed to Scripture. They obviously could take a different view entirely. It's not that they don't believe in predictive prophecy. They just believe that John was describing the events that were going on. Now, in the first century, in the destruction of Jerusalem. So, full preterists, if they're really full, say all of these things that are in the book have already taken place.
Ah, I see. Okay, I jumped the gun. Now it makes more sense.
Even the new heavens and the new earth.
What?
The new heavens and the new earth is the church.
Excuse me.
Satan is bound. The resurrection has taken place. It's not a physical resurrection.
So evidently some theologian or scholar with an agenda came up with some other ideas than the mainstream theories that were believed for almost 2,000 years. That's so weird. What changed?
That's what your scholars are. They're critics. That's what they call their study of the Bible, textual criticism. Do you like critics? You know, they're all a bunch of Siskel and Eberts, like, oh, like this with the Bible.
Life is precious, life is short, and the idiots who made this film...
It's like, no, I'm like this with the Bible. So I'm not a preterist. I don't believe it's past. But here's what they say. The revelation of Jesus Christ, verse 1, which God gave unto him to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. So they say, it was written just to show you things that will pass in the next 20, 30 years. For the time is at hand. So they say, see?
And you begin to recognize here, and Christ has already come. Christ came in 70 AD when the city of Jerusalem was destroyed.
So why do they try to always just make it all past? If the book of Revelation is all completed prophecy and it's all over, why even read it? You're wasting your time. So why do they even speak then? If they're right, then shut up!
Taking 2 hours of my life and robbing it from me.
Tell me a little bit more about these preterists. Are there different levels?
Partial preterists, that is, those who believe most of the book relates to 70 AD. This is no evangelical can be a full preterist.
most confused evangelicals who believe maybe in predictive prophecy and yet also believe in preterism.
Because you end up denying basic things about the Christian faith.
Because you've got nothing to offer me.
Except don't read the book.
There are so many contradictions.
But partial preterists will say the main part of the book is about what happened in 70 AD, but I do believe in chapter 19, chapter 21 and 22 are talking about the future.
That's a stretch.
Preterism is, to my mind, a very difficult one to sustain, especially if the book is written in 95 AD and it claims to be a prophecy.
I don't even listen to their silly arguments, and it's so sad to hear people say, no, the whole book's all past. It's really sad.
It robs life from people.
We don't need to depend on the scholars when we open up the book of Revelation.
Absolutely.
In fact, it might be good not to depend on the scholars.
And see, that's a really good thing to think about, because you kind of ordinarily think, I've got to have somebody break it down for me.
I want to talk about scholarly support. So despite what you might have heard, there is some good scholarly support for an early date.
Scholars, cool.
You've got scholars on the liberal end, you've got scholars on the conservative end.
I don't care about the scholars. I'm researching it for myself. Come join me, people. Let's discover the truth without the scholars interfering.
People with diverse backgrounds and theological perspectives highlight that this early date view isn't just some fringe view, but has been advocated by mainstream scholars.
We want no interference here. We are tired of the interfering scholars. Okay, now let's discuss what the vast majority of people believe as to when Revelation was written, the later date.
This was recognized by the early church. The date of the book of Revelation is, by tradition, it was written in the time of Domitian, the emperor. He reigned from 81 to 96, and the early Christians believed it was toward the end, so we're probably at 95 AD in terms of when this book is written. John is a very old man.
And the year that he wrote this by inspiration of the Holy Spirit was around 95 AD. Now, that would make him about that old.
Not quite. Most scholars know that John was about 10 to 15 years younger than Jesus, which means that he was probably born around 15 AD, which would make him about 80 years old when he wrote the book of Revelation.
Because it is believed that he was born around the same time that Christ was, or just slightly thereafter.
Pick your battles, I guess. I suppose it doesn't really matter.
But when was it written? All right, if I showed you some witnesses that said that the book was written between 90 to 100 AD, would you believe that? Well, as a matter of fact, we happen to have that.
Well, that's where church fathers give us a little history on this. The fathers tell us, when I say church fathers, I mean some of the very earliest leaders in the church post-apostle, which would be 2nd century, basically. And the men who wrote in that day tell us that John wrote this letter very late in the 1st century, probably in the mid-90s, 90, 95 AD. John would have had to have been in his 80s by then. That's assuming he was in his late teens when he was with Jesus. That fits because in the Gospels, it's evident that John's the youngest.
I agree.
At the Last Supper, which was a Passover meal, John is leaning against Jesus, and in the way they would recline around the table, they always positioned the youngest next to the most honored. And the early church fathers also tell us that he was put on Patmos by Domitian, the Emperor Domitian.
Were there more early date or late date believers back then?
We're not talking about just like 51% of the church here. We're talking about out of the access of the resources we have, both historical and into modern day. We're talking the vast majority of the church has dated the book of Revelation late.
But he wrote it during the reign of the emperor, the Roman emperor Domitian.
Some of these guys get the dates and the names just a little bit off.
Revelation was probably written during the time of Domitian, between 81 and 96 AD.
So that means probably the earliest we'd expect this book is around 80, and then church history theory tells us that John died in the early 90s.
That's some weird math.
So this book probably is written sometime between 80 and 90 for the dates of it.
Come on, man. Who says that?
Okay, so you heard these preachers saying that there are witnesses or there is historical evidence church fathers, bishops, or historians that mentioned that John wrote the book of Revelation during the reign of Domitian. Let's see if this is true.
Irenaeus, who lived about 130 to 202 AD, claims to have had a personal connection with the Apostle John through Polycarp. So John, and then Polycarp, and then Irenaeus. You can see these guys. And this one led this one to the Lord, who led this one to the Lord.
Irenaeus, who wrote in his book Against Heresy, said, talking about of him who saw the apocalyptic vision, meaning Revelation. It was seen no long time ago, but almost in our generation, toward the end of Domitian's emperorship.
What? Could you repeat that for me?
Irenaeus says that the book of Revelation was seen no very long time since, but almost in our day, toward the ends of the reign of Domitian.
That's just amazing. I guess I don't hear so good. Could you say that one more time, just a little louder?
This is Eusebius. He says, Irenaeus in the 5th book of his work Against Heresies, where he discusses the number of the name of Antichrist, which is given in the so-called Apocalypse of John, speaks as follows concerning him. And then this is the quote in verse 3. If it were necessary for his name to be proclaimed openly at the present time, it would have been declared by him who saw the revelation, for it was seen not long ago, but almost in our generation, our own generation, at the end of the reign of Domitian.
Is when it was written. So Irenaeus, an eyewitness, says Domitian. So in the time of Domitian, the book was written. When is that? Way after 70 AD. That's just one witness. Victorinus, who died in about 303 AD, writes, when John said these things, he was in the island of Patmos, condemned to the labor of the mines by Caesar Domitian.
Victorinus and Eusebius and Irenaeus and Polycarp, I highly suggest you read the following doctoral dissertation by Mr. Hitchcock, and I will leave a link in the description along with all the other videos. If you take nothing else from this video, read that dissertation. The most compelling evidence that I've ever seen. Exponentially better than anything else. Please read it. What about these preterists? Why are there so many people who follow this paradigm? I found this gentleman, whom I've already shown a short clip of previously. He seems to be one of the poster boys.
10 compelling reasons why I think the book of Revelation was written prior to the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. My first point, first of 10, and that is the temple was still standing in Revelation chapter 11. Jerusalem was standing, and the seer was directed to measure the temple and the altar. But the destruction is predicted as approaching. John assumes that the physical structure and the city are still standing, and he shows no awareness that the destruction and the trampling of the city have already happened. In fact, he portrays those as future events.
This guy is assuming that John is assuming that the temple was still standing. But let's not forget that John was writing apocalyptic prophecy here. So he was simply writing what God showed him.
If Revelation were written after AD 70, it would be inexplicable that John makes no mention about the most catastrophic event in Jewish history. That's the destruction of the temple. Instead, it presents the temple as still functioning, still standing, people still worshiping there.
No. Okay. The most catastrophic event in the history of Israel was certainly not the destruction of the temple, right? I mean, there are several events that were just as bad, if not worse. How about 6 million?
Really a significant war for the people of Israel, but wouldn't have even made the headlines.
The rest of his video is basically him defending preterism. But the focus of this video here is not on whether or not preterism is a sound doctrine or a logical interpretation. So what we want to focus on in his video is any historical or external evidence that he produces to support preterism. The internal evidence is for another session, because in my opinion, the whole theory of preterism hinges upon the date that Revelation was written. So I watched his whole video, and here's the historical evidence this gentleman produces to support the early date for the writing of the book of Revelation.
That brings me to my second point. and that is the lack of evidence for persecution under Domitian. The book of Revelation vividly describes severe persecution of Christians.
This comparison makes no sense, because the persecution in the book of Revelation has nothing to do with Domitian or Nero, unless you're a preterist.
Now, the fourth reason I want to bring us to is some external evidence. Now, again, this is more about removing some of the obstacle that you might have to accepting an early date. You may have heard that the external evidence strongly favors a late date, and that mainly comes from Irenaeus.
Okay, you've got our attention. You're talking about Irenaeus. How is he going to refute Irenaeus?
I think Irenaeus has his own problems. It might be that Irenaeus was supporting a later date view, but I think even that is easily argued the other way. Irenaeus is not unambiguous here, but there are clear external witnesses.
Where's the puppet master pulling the strings? Come on, man. You're just gonna brush over it like that? Just gonna.
Who would definitely support the idea that the book of Revelation was written prior to the fall of Jerusalem. One witness that we have is the Muratorian canon, which is roughly about the same time, maybe around 170 or so, roughly around the same time as Irenaeus, which would support a date before the fall of Jerusalem. The Syriac New Testament, for example, would date it at the time of Nero.
The Muratorian canon, you didn't explain it.
What happened with that?
Epiphanius of Salamis is another writer that would have preferred a date before the fall of Jerusalem.
What about the Syriac New Testament?
What happened with that?
So I guess what I'm trying to tell you is that there is some external evidence that would suggest a date into the 90s after the fall of Jerusalem, but that evidence isn't unambiguous, and there is counter evidence on the other side of this. So don't let the external evidence be a barrier to you accepting the early date. Before I move on, I want to say, though, external evidence can be flawed.
Did Columbus sail the ocean blue in 1492?
Irenaeus isn't an infallible guide. We put some weight on what he says, but Irenaeus isn't inspired and inerrant.
Unless Irenaeus had an agenda for lying about when John wrote Revelation, that John wrote Revelation at the end of Domitian's reign. World War II actually happened at the end of the presidency of Richard Nixon.
He puts the date of Jesus' death when Jesus is around, 50 years old or something like that. He makes mistakes.
Come on, man.
That was based on his interpretation of the text, not on historical evidence.
But the book of Revelation's self-testimony, I think, should weigh more heavily in our consideration than even the external dating. I think the internal evidence, some that we've already seen.
Self-testimony, aka internal evidence, aka the second coming was the destruction of Jerusalem. Of favorite preterist fiascos, I give this one a solid 9. Check this out. I love this one. The Counting of the Kings.
The Counting of Kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. If we start with Julius Caesar, that would make the 6th king align with Nero.
Now, what we're going to notice is that Revelation chapter 17, verse 10 and 11 say that the book was written during the time of Rome's 6th king, which was Vespasian, who ruled from 69 to 79 AD.
Even if one starts from Augustus, it points to Galba. Both of these would have been before the fall of Jerusalem.
Well, no one can agree on who was the first emperor or Caesar of Rome. Evidently, Julius was a Caesar. He was the first. However, Augustus was technically the first emperor of Rome. Most likely, Nero needs to be the 6th king in order for this to make sense.
Augustus was the first true emperor, although practically speaking, Julius Caesar would fit that role probably even better.
I highly recommend you watch that gentleman's video. It's very comprehensive. Okay, so now we've established that preterism is sort of weird. And church tradition from the 1st century AD indicates that none of the church fathers or lay members even conceived of the possibility of preterism. No one even had an inkling of a concept.
Right? So, are we going to listen to preterists? Heck no, man. You don't know what you're talking about.
I've settled upon the idea the strategy of making this simple video to point you in the right direction, because it's up to you to study this for yourself.
I love the idea of finding Christ in this book in every nook and cranny that we can.